my nose looks weird. Well, hello, hello. Let me turn this off. All right, so yeah. Good day, good morning. All right, so today we're gonna be looking into loneliness, since today is the Valentine's or V-Day, at least in the U.S. it is. So there's probably a lot of people out there. Let me check that nose. All right, there. I can see myself now. So loneliness is basically part of life. The reason I say that is that loneliness is basically just, it's one of those things that, like hunger, like being tired, like being happy, it exists. That feeling exists in everybody unless there is some kind of external stimuli, or like something from the outside, or something that is, maybe there could be something physical wrong with the brain, I guess, or something biologically wrong. I guess that can kind of like change the way you think and not allow you to feel loneliness. So loneliness is basically one of those things that we have to learn to live with. It's not a bad thing, and it's not necessarily a good thing. It's kind of like hunger. It's there for a reason. So there's a lot of sort of biological, or I guess you can say sort of human, or even just because of for survival reasons that we have this feeling. I mean, I can go into it, but I'm not gonna go into that because it's a different kind of talk. So being lonely doesn't mean that you need to be with somebody, basically, or that you need somebody. It just means that you crave either attention, or just being part of a group, or part of, just like having a social life kind of thing. So there's depression, and then there's anxieties, and all these things that can develop with the long periods of feeling lonely. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're lonely. It just means that you feel like you're lonely. So you can be around a bunch of people and still feel like you're alone. So I'm going to talk about the reasons, not the reasons why you're feeling alone, because there's different reasons. But I'm going to talk about how to tackle being lonely, and how to try and change the way you feel, basically. So one thing that I know for sure, that we all need to learn to live with it. So happiness actually depends on you learning, or being comfortable with being lonely or being alone. And from my experience, I think that forcing yourself to be lonely, or forcing yourself to feel lonely, not really in a crazy way, like, ignoring everybody, but I mean having short planned times of being alone, like not going out, like taking a long trip, like doing something alone, like working on a project, or working on, writing or whatever. Just, and by These periods, I mean, more than a day, probably. Like if you're only alone for like an hour, that's not gonna make you feel bad because you already know you're gonna be around people. So, especially if if there's a bunch of people waiting for you, kind of thing. But if you truly want to be comfortable with yourself, take a trip, take a 2 3 day trip, not to a fun place because you're gonna be distracted. Take a fun trip, not a fun trip. Take a trip to a place that you might not like. I know people take these nature walks, nature trips. They go to the beach. They go to to the mountains to camp or whatever. When they enjoy it, how's that gonna make you feel lonely? Because loneliness kicks in when you're actually bored, when you're struggling, when you're depressed, when you suffered through some kind of high stress situation. That's when loneliness kicks in, and that's when you really get tested. So you don't want to take a trip to the beach. You don't want to take a trip to some fun place, some city that you want to visit, some museum. You don't want to take those kind of trips. You want to take a trip, even just take a trip driving somewhere that you haven't been to. Try to make it more of a kind of like just to be a lone trip. Don't make it glamorous. Don't make it fun. Don't make it interesting. Don't make it, what it's not. So just take a trip and then maybe spend some time with yourself. I think that would show you how you actually feel about loneliness. And then from that, if you suffer from loneliness or not being comfortable with being alone, then you should actually start more like practicing sort of like selflessness kind of I would say activities, not activities, more like ways of thinking. So one easy way I think to deal with being or of being uncomfortable with being alone is by becoming selfless. Because when you become selfless, I think this is the core of being selfless, is not caring about your personal feelings kind of thing. You still care about goals, but you don't care about your feelings towards, life. You should care about yourself being healthy and that kind of stuff, but don't care about your needs and your wants. Like if you're basically you are alive, so you should care about being alive, but you shouldn't care about, let's say, not trumping, how do you say, going over other people's lives, messing people's lives, or even your own, over your goals. Because goals are basically, they're they should be your life. They should be kind of like part of your life, but they shouldn't be like stuck. They shouldn't be fixed. They should be flexible to to basically to mutate or to evolve according to your life, the way you're living. Like for example, if you're like a sports person and then somehow you injure your leg or your hand, your goals need to be flexible enough that you actually can live a comfortable, self loving kind of life without practicing what you thought you were going to practice all life. The same goes with money. Like if your goals were to buy this house and suddenly you got fired and you haven't been able to find a job for like 10 years, no, not 10 years, 5 years, let's say, you might have like a job that you don't like, but it's not the job that you wanted to. So those goals need to be flexible enough for you to still be okay with maybe it's not the same house, so you wanted maybe a smaller one, maybe in a different um, neighborhood, maybe in a different location, like in a different city. So those goals don't necessarily need to match, exactly what you want. So loneliness is basically one of those things that your personal goals don't, how do you say, your personal goals are not necessarily that important. So be flexible with your life, kind of. That's kind of what I'm trying to say. And this is where it gets, when you actually need it is when, let's say you get fired and then your wife or your significant other, your kids are no longer supporting your actions. They think you did something stupid, and maybe you made a decision that wasn't that great and you got fired, or I don't know, you lost a lot of money, or I don't know what happened. But let's say you're in that situation, very high stress, there's no support. You're gonna have you're gonna have to basically pull yourself up instead of relying on your family or your peers or the community. So those situations are very tough. So if you have a problem with loneliness, you are going to feel it, and then you're gonna fuck up basically. You're gonna do something stupid, and you're gonna kill your goals in the future. You're gonna mess up. But if you're comfortable, you're gonna basically your mindset's gonna change, and you're gonna be like, all right, so this happened, and life didn't happen the way I wanted it to happen, or the way I thought it was gonna happen. So you're probably just gonna switch. Just change it up, and then even if nobody cares about your future goals, you're gonna care. And this might seem a little bit like being selfish, but it's not. It's being comfortable with being your own, being your own person. And those feelings that you get when somebody doesn't like you that you like, it's not gonna affect you that much. Because the reason why people feel bad when somebody that doesn't like them, somebody that they like doesn't like them, is because they feel like there's something wrong with them. And being okay with that, just you know being okay with you being the only person that likes you, is that support that you need when somebody doesn't like you that you like. It's easy to like say, fuck the haters, that kind of stuff. That's pretty easy. Cause why should you like somebody that doesn't like you? Yeah. Or why should you care if somebody that you don't like doesn't like you? So that's easy. But what if somebody you like doesn't like you or hates you? And that's when it hurts. And that's when you you start feeling like, what the hell's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? That kind of, those kind of feelings, or those kind of thoughts enter the mind. So you want to be like, oh, you want to say, okay, I'm good. I don't know what's wrong with them. I mean, it's cool. If they don't like me, I mean, as long as you know you're okay, you should be fine. So loneliness is basically that. When you have problems when other people don't like you, and you feel alone, basically. You don't feel a connection, so you feel alone, like you're alone. And the the fix would be basically to you yourself like you and be comfortable with that. And I think people should just practice knowing, themselves and living their life through themselves, not through other people. Not Don't live life expecting gratitude from others. Don't live life expecting, glory from others. Don't live life expecting thanks or whatever. Don't don't live through other people. Experience life through your eyes, your thoughts, your feelings, basically. And if you're feeling happy, make sure it's your happiness that you're feeling, not others. Because when you feel through others, that's when it affects you most. I'm not saying to ignore others all the way. I'm just saying, don't live through others. Be happy for yourself, you know. So, in one, because I think people were made to live. Whoever made people, however they came to live, main purpose of people is to live, to experience, to feel, to know. That's life right there. So if you're let's say you have goals and stuff, so you're doing things, but let's say you're doing things for others. I mean, it's okay. Maybe you want to help them out, but in the end, you gotta satisfy your goals too. I mean, your personal stuff. And if those personal things don't really matter to anybody else, I mean, you need to be okay with it. That's when I say, don't don't live through others, basically. And if those goals don't aren't feasible, how do you say, if you can't do them or make those goals happen, you shouldn't be stuck there saying, feeling like you failed. I mean, it's okay to fail. If that happens, you want to be okay or flexible enough to let go of those goals. This would be like, the selfless part. Don't be attached to something physical, something, or even something mental, because mental things can get you too. So don't have an attachment to anything and just let it go. Even people. I mean, if somebody doesn't want to hang out with you or somebody doesn't want to be your friend, it's okay. As long as you're okay with yourself, that's the goal. I mean, that's the real goal. That's life right there. That's happiness. Being okay with being alone is the real happiness. So if everybody dies and you're still going to live, you still want to live and do things, then that's how you should feel, even though you're around with others. All right, so I'm gonna read a quote that I pulled out from somewhere. So this is a quote about life and living. I would rather be ashes than dust. I would rather that my spark should burn out in a brilliant blaze than it should be stifled by dry rot. I would rather be a superb meteor, every atom of me in magnificent glow, than a sleepy and permanent planet. So, this is where I agree most. The proper function of man is to live, not exist. I shall not waste my days. In trying to prolong them, I shall use my time. And this is a Jack London quote. And it's basically saying that, men were created, or men and women were created to live. So you are happiest when you are living, when you're doing things, and living is not necessarily doing work, hard work, just living your mind, expressing your mind, basically, using your mind to do things. Because you could be like kind of like a robot and do things and still be doing things. It doesn't really mean don't be lazy. It just means doing things the way your mind, wants to do things. And at the same time, you know, being active, I guess. All right, so that's pretty much it. Subscribe, dislike, and hate or comment